Hello, I'm so excited to be starting a new quilt. I just started this week a new quilt called the Single Irish Chain Quilt by Jaws Makes Quilts. It's beginner friendly, so I'm very excited about that. And the main reason why I'm very excited about that is I'm using flannel for the first time. So I thought before I get too involved in my flannel endeavors, I should start with something pretty easy. So I've heard a lot of rumors that flannel is very difficult to work with, and I've watched a lot of YouTube videos out there. So thank you to everyone who shared your best practices. I have a couple different colors that are going to make up the Irish chain. So this first color, it's a cream plaid. It's called a Glen Ellen plaid or a Prince of Wales plaid. So it's almost like little houndstooth lines that intersect and make up a plaid. My next plaid is like an indigo blue plaid, and that's going to be the main field of the quilt, whereas that cream Glen Ellen plaid will be the chain part of the quilt. And this is in the herringbone pattern. So I don't know if you can see what I'm doing here, but I'm going for an Irish tweed jacket look when I found the fabrics for the Irish chain quilt. So to make the fabric a bit easier to work with, I actually bought liquid starch, and I mixed about a gallon of liquid starch with a couple gallons of water, and I took my yardages of fabric and I dunked it and soaked it in the water, and then I took my yardages of fabric and I laid them across our lawn. So I believed I had about 7 yards of this indigo fabric, and I had 5 or 6 yards of this cream fabric, and they all laid across the lawn to air dry. This cream color fabric, for whatever reason, got a little bit crisper. It's almost like paper. I don't know if you can just see that, but it's super crisp. So far I found that cutting it was very easy. I am not getting a lot of fussy fibers off of them, and sewing them has been super easy so far. So if you're familiar with quilting and you look at a pattern like this, you can probably imagine how it goes together. But what we're going to do is we're going to strip sew a lot of the strips of fabric together like this, and then what I'll end up doing at a later round will be to sew this on to this end for 1/3 of them, and then for 2/3 of them I'm going to sew this cream one to this side. So I'm going to have 2/3. They're going to be 3 strip wide strips. That'll be white, blue, white, and then 1/3 will be blue, white, blue. And then from that, what we're going to do is subcut that into strips and sew those back together into a square that's going to be like that checkerboard square. And then to the side of that checkerboard square will just be a solid square from the herringbone pattern. So I will want to pay particular attention to the direction that the herringbone runs. Currently in these strips, it's running what I would consider side to side. So when I orientate those squares later on when I'm assembling the quilt top, I'll want to do that. So yeah, everything so far is going really well. Another thing I like to do, I hadn't used my Baby Lock Presto in a little bit because I've been sewing with my 1929 Singer for my last couple projects. And so I wanted to check the seam allowances on everything to make sure I had them precise. So I took 3 1.5 inch strips of fabric and I put on new 1/4 inch seam tape. So if you don't have any of that, let me get a roll out for you. So this is 1/4 inch seam tape by Cluck Cluck Sew, and for most new projects I put that on the surface of my sewing table to make sure I'm going to line everything up with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. When I first got this, I was kind of surprised it came in a roll. I was wondering why it came in a roll, but if you leave it on for too long, it will add a residue to your surface, so it's really important to periodically change it. All right, so do you want to see me sew some strips and how well this starching method is working for this fabric? have my machine set in the middle position, and I have that lined up with my 1/4" seam allowance. Because it is flannel and it's historically known to ravel, I have the stitch setting at 1.4, so it's a much tinier, hopefully stronger stitch to hold these seams together. Now I'm going to go press, and I'm going to press it closed first to set the seam, and then I'm going to press it so that the seam goes to the dark side. So I'm pressing the seam closed, and that just helps set the seam. Pretty happy with this strip. It seems pretty uniform down the length. So now I am going to open it up, and as long as the light's on the dark side when I open it up, it naturally kind of wants to flip to the seam allowance to the dark side. So I'm just kind of feeling underneath and making sure it's doing what I want it to do. And it's probably because of all that starch that's already in the fabric, but it seems to just be pressing really well without hardly any help. So I know that I use a lot of starch because it's flannel, and flannel tends to fray, and flannel tends to stretch, and it's notorious for just being harder to work with than plain woven cotton. It almost makes me want to be a believer of starch and heavily starch everything I quilт, because this has just been so easy. So this part does not seem to want to fold over, so I'm using my thumb. A little bit of fuzz here. It's the first fuzz I've seen out of several strips. Can't complain. I'm just so happy how this Glen Allen plaid and this herringbone plaid are pairing up together.